You're listening to the #1 podcast for nonprofit leaders, getting your nonprofit fully funded. This is the Fundraising Masterminds Podcast.
Bill Bright would notoriously have stories about walking into a businessman's office or a businesswoman's office and asking for $1 million and getting $1 million on the spot.
Wow.
And those kinds of things happen, but one of the things that I always used to joke with him about is that it's nice that you can walk in, but what's often forgotten was the years of cultivating the relationship and getting the partner prepared so that he could walk in and ask for $1 million check.
Welcome back to another episode at the Fundraising Masterminds Podcast. We have a great episode lined up for you today. We are going to be talking about Major Donor Fundraising 101.
Nice.
And with me is my co-host, Jim Dempsey.
Hey, Jason.
And Jim, it's good to see you again.
You too.
Thank you.
This is one of my very, very favorite topics, major donor fundraising.
Yeah, so let's not waste any time at all. Let's just dive right in.
Yeah.
So we want to talk about major donors.
Right.
It's something that every nonprofit wants to have.
Right.
You know, is a lot of times people are thinking, man, if I could just get that $1 million check,
all my problems will be solved.
All my problems will go away.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, so it's kind of like it, but it feels a little bit like a lottery in the sense of like, you know, you gotta, you know, get lucky. You know, you're kind of going along, and all of a sudden,
gotta
like
spin the wheel, and it lands right for you.
And if you do the right things, and you know, and some people are really good at the lottery, and they tend to find these people, and it just feels like, well, how do I get this major donor thing? But they don't realize that there might be a strategy for getting major donors, and that's kind of what we wanted to talk about today. Is like just kind of the basic principles. That's why we call this like the Major Donor Fundraising 101, meaning like what are the basic principles of cultivating partners that write big checks.
Right.
And I know, just for the purpose of our audience, I know that you worked with Bill Bright at Campus Crusade for Christ back in the 80s.
1980s, yeah.
And you've told me some of these stories. Maybe you could share one of them with us, but you know, he really had a vision of he wanted to ask people for $1 million checks.
Yeah.
And he, you know, tell me some of the bad stories.
Well, of course, the History's Handful was just legendary from the standpoint that we wanted to find 1,000 people, each of which give $1 million to help reach the kingdom. And that cumulatively, that was $1 billion. And Bill Bright would notoriously have stories about walking into a businessman's office or a businesswoman's office and asking for $1 million and getting $1 million on the spot.
Wow.
And those kinds of things happen, but one of the things that I always used to joke with him about is that it's nice that you can walk in, but what's often forgotten was the years of cultivating the relationship and getting the partner prepared so that he could walk in and ask for $1 million check. And we'd kind of laugh about that, but it was always really, really just an exciting time when we'd have those individuals who give that much money.
Yeah. And it kind of think about it like in the sales world, right? Where you have like setters and closers.
Yes, exactly.
Right? A lot of times you have a team of people that work on, you know, finding leads, cultivating leads, having discussions, and doing all that like ground tilling thing. And they get the person to the point where they're just ready to be sold. Right. You know, they're ready to be closed on the deal. And they hand that lead over to your #1 salesperson. Right. And he just gets on a phone and just like, this is what you need.
Takes care of business.
Boom, and it's just done.
Right.
And that's one of the things that we wanted to talk about here is the strategy behind, you know, how do you cultivate these major donors so that we can get to the point where our executive director can just go in and ask for a big check. And so we came up with 5 key principles of just basic major donor 101 kind of thing. And the first one that we wanted to talk about is just identifying major donors.
Right. Well, you know, it's funny, Jason, how often I hear that there are hidden gems within your own organization. A lot of people don't even realize that there are major donors out there in their organization. They don't even know about it. First of all, we want to look at how do we find those individuals in your base. And remember, what we want to be looking at, you've got, for if you're a nonprofit leader, you've got a mass of individuals who give to your organization. And what we want to first do is we want to begin to identify what's our critical few. And typically that is the 20% that brings in 80% of your dollars. And so it's so important that we begin to look at what is someone currently giving to our organization, because that will be one of the best ways to surface those people. And we want to begin to identify what is it about our organization and what is it about them that causes us to sync together as a whole. So that's really, really important as we're trying to find out who we want to identify. And make sure that you are categorizing, you're able to, in a sense, slice and dice and identify the different categories. Now, typically within an organization like Crew, but it's also a very standard practice, is that any individuals giving less than $1,000, so from $1 to $999, those are typically what we would consider your mass donors. Then you have a middle donor category, which is typically from a largest single gift of $1,000 to $499, and then anything over $5,000 would be considered a major donor for most organizations. Now, we also move that to another level, which would be a mega donor category, and that could be $10,000 or even $25,000 or more. So that really helps to identify those.
Now, the second key principle in working with major donors is that you got to do some research on, once you've identified the major donors, you want to start to do some research on them. And when I first heard this, I felt like this feels a little bit creepy
or
in
invasive.
I was like, you really look up their wealth and you really look up their value of their home, and it feels kind of creepy in a sense of like, why would you do that? But tell me a little bit of the process of like what you typically would do in researching people and why do you do that?
Yeah. Well, the last thing we're needing you to do is be a creeper or a stalker or whatever. That's not what we're saying. All we're saying is that there's information out there in the internet, and it's just important and valuable to take advantage of that information that's out there. It's out there for the general public to consume. Now, the partner may or may not know it's out there, but it is valuable and important. Something as simple as just downloading a Zillow app and looking up the address of the particular person that you're interested in identifying or finding out about. You can find out a lot based on the value of someone's home and the, where they live and the value of that home. Now, you may also have a situation where you've got the millionaire next door where they live in a much smaller house than they have the capacity for, but it does give you a good start. Remember that 95% of people's wealth is in their assets, not in their income. So it really is important that people are generally living on their stored revenue and their assets, but take advantage of those opportunities. Google someone, find out a little bit about them on Facebook, on Instagram. There's a lot of different sources. If you want to even take it to the next step, you can pay for services such as Wealth Engine. We take advantage at Crew of using a service called Wealth Engine, which allows us to be able to identify individuals. And Wealth Engine runs people through a series of checks. So they do a lot of the homework for us. They do a lot of the research. They identify what do people give to, what's their needs, what's their interest, what's their capacity, what's their income. You have a good spectrum of key indicators. And then they rank or rate those people. And that really helps us narrow down. And what we are currently doing as an example, any new donor to Crew will be run through the Wealth Engine screening. So we will identify very early on, is this person a diamond in the rough? Maybe they gave a gift of $25 or $100 or $250, but their capacity is to give $37 million. So it's
so you use this research as a way of knowing like maybe what kind of events to invite them to,
right?
Or what really, kind of mailing list to get them on, or
yes, of the cultivation strategy. That's exactly right. Yeah. So is this person, should they just stay in direct mail? Should they start to receive a phone call from a personal representative? Or in the next extreme is, should they be receiving face-to-face appointments with individuals, with representatives? Or like you said, do we invite them to particular events such as a major donor weekend? So all those kinds of things allows us to classify. And remember, what you're trying to do is, I mean, if you think about this development as a funnel, you've got a lot of names coming in at the wide end of the funnel, but eventually you're narrowing those down to that critical few. And those are the people that you want to really, really drill down on, getting to know them better and understanding who they are better.
Well, yeah. And the next point that we wanted to talk about is kind of related to that, which is building relationships.
Yeah.
It's really important that you don't just start putting them in a system, but you actually intentionally are reaching out and having a personalized way of building relationships with these major donors.
A personalized approach is so important, Jason. Too many organizations treat everybody exactly the same. And
well, it's a lot easier.
Well, it's easier, but it definitely is not fruitful. Yeah. And that's a big mistake that we make. Mm-hmm. Now, I've had people come to me and say, well, Jim, God doesn't look at people differently, and he does not. He values everyone equally. But if I look at the model that Jesus set out for us, Jesus ministered to the masses, but to accomplish what he wanted to accomplish in the 33 years he was on the earth and really the 3 years of ministry, he needed to really focus his time and attention on a critical few. And for him, it was those 12, and even within the 12, Peter, James, and John. He knew that he was going to get the greatest impact by focusing in on those critical few. And so that's
in fact, I actually just read this in the scriptures last week, where I was reading through the parables in Matthew, and Jesus would talk to the crowd in parables. Yes. I remember like the parable of the seed.
Right.
And he would talk about the 4 different kinds of seed or the soils.
Right.
And then his disciples would actually pull him aside and say, well, why are you talking to the crowd in all these cryptic ways? Like, why don't you just say what it is? And his response to them, it's not for them to know the secrets of the kingdom, but for you to know the secrets of the kingdom. So in a sense, it was like all the parables. I mean, I know it was to fulfill prophecy that they would hear and not understand. Right. But it almost was kind of like everything Jesus did was for his disciples' benefit.
Right. Exactly.
He was really pouring into them.
The message still went out to everybody, but there was that critical few, once again, using that same term that he had that message for. And so we really want to begin to build and cultivate a personalized strategy for our major partners. And so it's so important. In fact, one of the things, shameless promotion that we have out on, and we'll put this in our description, but we've really incorporated and endorsed what we refer to as a 3-3-3 skip method. It is that personalized attention that people need. If you look at even a sports team, and the most effective coaches are not the ones who accomplish their task through the group, but they accomplish it by individually personalizing a strategy and a plan so that collectively they're able to accomplish it, but they accomplish it through the individual needs and desires of the particular athlete. And it's exactly the same way with our partners. Having an individualized or personalized plan is what you need to do.
Well, this is great. And we got 2 more things. But before we get into the last 2, if you found this to be really helpful, go ahead and hit that subscribe button if you're watching us on YouTube, or subscribe on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, because we've got weekly episodes coming out, and we would love for you to get those, to get notified of them, for them to show up in your feed. And we'd love to know what you think. Write us a comment. We personally read all the comments. We love hearing from you guys. And if you have any other ideas of things that you've learned about major donors, definitely let us know in the comments below. I know we've also been working on a new online course, which we're calling Major Donor Mastery.
Yes.
And we're excited to get that out to people. We've got that on our website, and we'll put links to it in the description, and I'll put a QR code on the screen of how you can look into that. But this new Major Donor Mastery program is really exciting. It's our latest project that we've been working on. It's an online course, and it's really everything you need to know about major donors. Maybe you could just give us a quick overview of all the things we cover in it.
Well, it takes these principles that we're talking about today, but it unpacks them. We've got
a lot of
anywhere between 30 and 40 hours of information that we will put out to people. We drill down on how specifically do we identify our partners. We talk about which are the best partners to be looking for. How do we get an appointment with a person, not just with someone who's already been helping you, but with someone new? What to say once you get in that appointment, what to bring with you, how to bring it up, how to respond to the various kinds of responses, yes, no, maybe, and then how to follow up with them. What are the things that you need to do, and what do they need? How do we steward these individuals? What kind of reports, what kind of feedback do we need? How do we ask them a second time? It is just a wealth.
It's like everything that you've learned at Crew with major donors is packed into this course.
Right.
So in this course is a self-paced course. It's not quite the same as our Perfect Vision Dinner mentorship program, which is more of us working with you. But this is something that you can sign up for anytime. It's available to you right now. You can just scan the QR code. You can learn about it. You can purchase the course, and you can kind of go through it at your own leisure. So if you're wanting to look into how do I develop major donors, what are the actual steps for finding those people, walking them through. I personally love the section where we talk about like the actual appointment. You know, like what do you actually bring to an appointment? Right. What do you say at an appointment? How do you close an appointment? What do you do after the appointment? Yeah. How do you follow up? All that stuff is discussed in major mega detail, as much detail as we could think of in this course.
And using examples of what happens when someone says this, or how do you respond to this? Yeah.
So if you really want to learn how to bring your major donor cultivation strategy to another level, scan the QR code on the screen. It will take you to our new Major Donor Mastery course, and you can check that out, and hopefully that'll be helpful to you. Well, let's get back into the final two things.
Yes.
So the basic ideas that we've had so far is, got them right here. Number one, identifying the major donors, who they are.
Right.
Number two, doing some research on them.
Right.
Number three, building relationships with them.
Right.
And then the fourth thing is actually making an ask during an appointment.
Right. Well, here's the thing. You've got to really go eyeball to eyeball with someone. That is the key to successful major donor.
And that's the part that probably scares everybody.
It does. That is the thing.
Like the last thing I want to do.
Right. In fact, I generally will say, and I've found this from 40 years of experience, is that most nonprofit leaders would rather communicate with people through the mail. They'd rather send a letter or send an email because it's very non-threatening. If someone chooses not to help, they just don't respond, and I don't even know it, frankly. Yeah. I just know of the people that did respond, but I don't know how anyone else did. But when you go eyeball to eyeball with someone, that makes a big difference. Now, I will tell you this, that a direct mail letter, the response rate of a direct mail letter is about 2%. You add a phone call to that, and it might get 25 to 30%, which is huge. But you go eyeball to eyeball, face to face with someone, your response rate is 50%. That's your success rate. Wow. So going face to face with someone is so important. But it is threatening, and it is nerve-wracking, but you've got to do it. That's the only way that you're going to have a relationship with someone. I use the analogy often, and you and I you've heard me say this many times, but building a major donor relationship, building a partnership with someone is very much like a marriage. When you started courting Jennifer, you started by asking her out. You started to have dates. You got to know her a little bit. You got to the point where you both connected enough. You made an ask. You asked her to marry you. She made the decision to say, yes, I agree to that ask. You sealed the deal through matrimony.
And it was very nerve-wracking.
And through the whole thing.
Sweaty palms.
Sweaty palms. But you know what? Look at the success rate. You have 10 kids today and 10 really great kids. And God has used your marriage in a tremendous way. And I believe it's the same way with our partners. You will have a marriage with them and a partnership that can impact eternity. And you've got to look at that end result. And that's got to be your goal in mind, is how can we together, meshing their desires, their needs with our objectives, how can we mesh together?
Well, and I think a lot of times people, when they think about the face-to-face or like building the relationship,
right?
I think they confuse the idea of like manipulating,
right?
And I think we talked about maybe even doing a whole podcast episode on this topic, but
between motivation and manipulation.
Yeah, because I think a lot of people would say, well, you can't possibly care about everybody.
Right.
So then aren't you just kind of like manipulating circumstances so that they'll give to you?
Right.
And what's the difference between manipulating and motivate,
Well, Jason, but the bottom line in all this is that you do need to look at your own desire. You have to look at your own heart. I have to go in genuinely saying, I care about this person because they're a child of God. They love the Lord. They genuinely have the same interests that I have. And I want to get to know this person a little bit more. Yes, they do. They are people of means. They can help me accomplish what I want to accomplish with our mission. But I really do care about that person.
Yeah. When you really want to guard yourself from the idea of like, I want to get this appointment with this person because they can do stuff for me.
Just seeing them as dollar signs. Yeah.
Yeah.
You got to get past that.
We got to get past that. And we have to have we have to see them as people.
Right.
And treat them like people.
Yeah.
And that will help take your relationship
not
to
a
another
means to an end, right?
And I mean, I'm sure they can tell if you're after their dollars.
The genuineness, really comes out. Yeah.
So it's not just. I'm sure they can detect it,
right?
Right. And we don't want to. Right. We definitely don't want them to feel that way because that's going to steer them away.
Right.
So the last thing we wanted to talk about was stewardship of major donors, and this gets into stewardship of major donors.
Right.
And that has to do with the 333 SKIP communication plan, thanking them personally for their gifts, using their gifts as intended.
Yes.
Communicating with them regularly and transparently.
Right.
So talk a little bit about some of this stuff.
Yeah. Well, Jason, it is so important. If you get a yes from someone and they decide to give, you need to make sure that you do everything you can. Number one, to thank people. I just heard just a heartbreaking statistic. 75% of nonprofit organizations never thank people. We were talking about the other day about an event that you had gone to that someone never sent a thank you to you. Just breaks my heart. And the people give.
It just feels like the most basic common courtesy
it does.
If someone gives you any amount, you should be thankful.
At least let them know that your money wasn't left on the table, that your check wasn't lost.
It at least acknowledges that they got it.
They even got it. Exactly. Let alone thank them and appreciate them.
Yeah.
But if after you've thanked them, you want to let them know how that money is spent. Because if you hope to get another gift from them, a second and a third or more gift, then you're going to have to let them know how that first gift. And frankly, there's no one more excited about a second gift than someone who is happy about their first gift.
Well, actually, I have a good story to tell about this with my ministry in Zambia. We're 3-4 years into this now. As we were getting started, I was very aware of the sacrifice that I was asking people. I was trying to raise, $5,000 to dig a well. I was trying to, at one point I raised $25,000 to build a school building
and a truck
and $40,000 to buy a truck.
Right.
And I'm very much aware that people are giving sacrificially for this. So I I was very intentional to show people like, hey, I actually bought the truck.
Right.
You know, like,
right.
hey, we actually built the well, or
and here's what we did with the truck, or whatever. Yeah.
And so, and I would do that like right away, because I wanted people to feel like, hey, we were just asking you to help us dig a well, and look,
now it's done.
Now there's a well.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I remember specifically with the well, because it's dramatic, you know, you see the water spewing everywhere. And then they actually invited their whole village, and they did like a well opening ceremony, and they had the mayor of their town come and speak. And it was quite a thing for them to get a well at the village. And we videotaped that and put together a little, 2-minute video to music, and just kind of capturing the energy of that. And that was really impactful to the people who gave to the well, because, and I actually had some people comment after, like a year later, saying things like, I really like getting opportunities from you, because I know that when you say you're going to do something, you're really going to do it.
Right.
Because you've proven to me that when you ask for money for whatever, you show me that it actually gets done. And, and I've because I've been intentional to do that, it's built trust in people.
Right.
And then, and they just, it starts to become, part of your culture in a way of like, I can trust these people with my money.
Right.
And I know that they're not going to just use it however they see fit.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
So that's a big piece of what we're trying to say here is it's really important to follow up with thank you letters for sure. That's just like basic common courtesy. But also just showing
how their money was used,
how their money is being used.
And you talked about the 3-3-3 skip strategy, which is 3 letters, emails, 3 phone calls, 3 visits throughout the year to keep people plugged in.
Yeah. So this is great. And this is, again, we're just going over the basics 101 for major donors. Again, if you're listening to this and you're like, I really need to ratchet up my major donor strategy. Well, we've got some great news for you, because we actually just finished putting together a brand new course called Major Donor Mastery. And this course is one of the best things that we've put together on the topic of major donors. Jim, major donors are the most requested topic that we get in this podcast. And people, they get fundraising, they get events to a certain degree, they get the basics of what we're talking about, but they always are asking us questions like, how do I get major donors? And so that's one of the reasons why we put together this Major Donor Mastery course, is because we really wanted to just take all the wealth of knowledge that you've gained working for one of the world's largest organizations. Crew, you oversee a $750 million budget annually, and a lot of those are being covered by major donors. So you have a lot of experience working with major donors, doing a lot of face-to-face. I see you get plane tickets and you're flying out all over the country. And a lot of times I'm like, why are you over here? What are you doing over here? And you're like, major donor appointment.
Got to be in front of them.
Yeah. So, I mean, you literally fly across countries and fly into cities to meet with people.
That's right.
And to have major donor appointments. So you have a lot of experience with this, and I think that qualifies you for helping us understand how to master major donor appointments. So if this is something that you are interested in checking out, we're going to put a QR code on the screen. You can scan that with your phone. We'll also put a link in the description, but check it out. It's worth looking into. Well, Jim, we've got a lot of great episodes coming in the future. If you loved the content that we provided here, let us know in the comments. Give us a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel and share this with your friends. Share this with other ministry leaders that might also benefit from this organization. And as always, thank you so much for your time. And we hope that you enjoyed this episode. We'll see you next time.
Take care.